Dense morning mist clung to the thatched roofs of the riverside village. The air hummed with mosquito wings and whispered with the calls of forest creatures stirring along the banks of the Amazon. Children lay feverish in hammocks, their shallow breaths filling houses once alive with laughter. Mothers paced the clay floors, desperate and exhausted. Grey-haired healers wrung their hands in dismay for the local cures herbs gathered from the jungle and poultices rubbed into aching limbs had done little more than delay the disease's cruel progression. Nara stood at the edge of the river, gaze fixed on the waters that both gave life and threatened to take it. She clutched a slender wooden canoe paddle, chest tight with longing and fear. Her father's once broad shoulders had withered in just a few short weeks. Villagers murmured about lost hope, about remote cures rumoured to exist upstream. Nara knew she could not remain motionless while her people's spirits eroded. She stepped into the canoe, her heart brimming with purpose. Not many in the village understood or believed the ancient legends that spoke of shape-shifting dolphins. Some considered the stories cautionary tales meant to dissuade children from wandering the riverbanks at night. Others maintained that the pink dolphins, or bottos, could assume the form of a handsome stranger, luring unsuspecting souls into the depths. But the story that enraptured Nara was of a rare gift the bottos possessed, an unparalleled knowledge of healing waters and hidden herbs. Her grandmother used to recall nights under moonlight when the shape-shifting dolphin man would visit lonely hearts, leaving them both enchanted and afraid. "They dwell between worlds," the old woman had said, eyes gleaming. "They know secrets we mortals can't fathom." As the villagers' plight grew worse, Nara clung to these words, sensing that somewhere in the swirling currents a cure awaited. Determined as an arrow shot from a bow, she travelled upstream, vanishing beneath overhanging vines that dripped dew and hope. The forest enveloped Nara in a hushed embrace. Leaves shimmered with hidden birds, and monkeys called from high canopies, echoing across a labyrinth of green. She steered her canoe along narrow tributaries, guided by slender streaks of sunlight that pierced the foliage. Each time a scaled shape slithered near the water's surface, her hand twitched closer to her knife's hilt, yet it was her uneasy heart that churned hardest. Days trickled by in a monotony of paddling and anxious vigil. She recalled the healer's words, describing plants with bright red stems or blossoms shaped like a star. Time after time she scoured the muddy banks for them, sifting through tangled roots. The plants she did collect were stored carefully in woven baskets. But each night, alone under the forest's watchful stares, she questioned whether her grandmother's stories had been nothing more than fanciful myths. On the fifth evening, Nara found a tucked-away lagoon fed by an underground spring. The water gleamed with a silver sheen beneath the moon. She dragged her canoe onto a sandy bank and set up her small camp. Sleep tugged at her eyes, but a soft ripple lured her attention to the lagoon's center. There, a pink dorsal fin broke the surface, gliding in languid circles. Nara's heart thumped in her throat. She watched as the creature's shape changed before her eyes. The fin and snout effaced as though folding inward, limbs emerging with a slow fluidity. Where the dolphin once swam, a figure now rose from the waters. A tall, lithe man with wet, dark hair clinging to his shoulders. He was bathed in moonlight, half submerged. Somewhere between reality and dream, Nara stood transfixed. Her fingers trembled at the sight of the shapeshifter, and an electric hush fell over the lagoon. She felt an instinct to turn and flee, memory flashing with all the warnings she had ever heard. Yet she sensed neither malice nor threat. He lifted a hand to beckon her closer, an invitation filled with an inexplicable gentleness. Steadying her breath, she approached the lagoon's edge, wading in up to her ankles. Even from a distance, she could discern an unusual gleam in the man's eyes. "Why have you come so far upstream?" he inquired, in a voice that rippled like water over smooth stones. It took a moment for Nara to find her voice. Each word emerged as a plea. Her people were ill, medicine had failed, and she had ventured forth in search of rumored cures. She spoke of life along the river banks, of nights haunted by coughing, of fear that she might never see her father's bright laugh again. The Dolphin man, the boater, listened quietly, gravity etched across his features. As silence spooled out between them, the gentle sound of lapping water seemed to tick in time with Nara's heartbeat. Finally, the shapeshifter bowed his head. "Mortals do not often seek us willingly. Your devotion is rare." He turned slightly, revealing the pale pink hue that still flashed along his back and shoulders in the moonlight, a reminder of the aquatic form he had shed. "I am called Araguia," he said, words resonating across the water. "We know of a place where healing plants grow, but it is not easily reached, and it is forbidden to reveal it to any mortal." Nara's eyes widened. She had expected a challenge, but the conviction in his tone cut deep. "I have nothing to offer in exchange," she said quietly, voice wavering. Araguia gazed at her, his expression shifting from solemn to thoughtful. "Perhaps not yet," he murmured. Sleep was elusive. Nara found herself by the embers of a small fire, hugging her knees, scanning every ripple for another glimpse of Araguia. The lagoon's glassy surface reflected the glowing moon, an unsteady mirror. At last water parted, and the shapeshifter emerged again, this time stepping onto the bank in full human form, wearing a simple white cloth around his waist. He motioned for Nara to follow him deeper into the forest. When she hesitated, he extended a hand, and the sincerity in his eyes stirred her soul. Drifting through a tangle of vines and elephant ear plants, they reached a hollowed-out trunk nestled beneath ancient kapok trees. Inside, dusty stone steps spiraled downward. "We Botos guard many passageways," Araguia explained softly. "Not all are meant for human eyes. Each step felt like a threshold between waking and dreaming, their flickering torch revealing painted murals of dolphins dancing among stars. At the bottom, a small chamber glowed with bioluminescent mushrooms clinging to the ceiling. In the faint light, enormous jars lined the walls, filled with unknown powders, dried herbs, and substances that seemed to pulse like raw magic. Araguia ran his fingers along the jars as though recalling each elixir's story. "It has been a long time since I walked among humans," he confessed. "My people fear your kind's unpredictability, but your devotion to your village is stronger than the usual suspicion in mortal hearts." With care, he selected a clay container sealed with wax. "This is Piarana's mantle," he said, voice echoing. "Steep it in water with the right herbs and it can cure fevers of the blood. But you must find one final ingredient yourself, the petals of the Katuaba lily, which grows where the waters run warm and swift. I cannot gather it in my dolphin form. The currents are too turbulent even for us. You must do it on foot." For several days they journeyed together, Nara in awe at Araguia's knowledge of hidden trails and uncharted streams. He rarely assumed his dolphin form on shore, seemingly content to walk at her side. Yet when the heat grew unbearable, or the boat was forced to navigate a narrow channel, Araguia would slip into the water with a practiced grace, becoming the sleek pink dolphin that guided their canoe from beneath. A fragile bond began to bud in the hush of the forest, shared smiles as they found safe harborage for the night, soft laughter when Araguia stumbled over an odd turn of phrase, unfamiliar after so long away from humanity. Even in the quiet moments, Nara sensed something blooming between them, an undercurrent of trust and fascination that defied the senses. She remembered her grandmother's warnings. A dolphin's heart does not belong in a human chest. Yet each time she locked eyes with Araguia, she felt a stirring, unlike any other. At last, they arrived at a region the local tribes called the Boiling Currents. True to its name, the water roiled over jagged rocks, unleashing a thunderous roar that shuddered through tree roots. Rising mist turned the air humid and thick, An ancient walkway of slippery stones formed a precarious path along the edge. With each trembling step, Nara's ankle threatened to lose its footing. Araguaia remained close behind, wincing whenever the rushing water swallowed her foot up to the knee. Their objective was a solitary cove near the base of a small waterfall where the catuaba lily was said to bloom. Along the way, they passed swirling clusters of fish and glimpsed giant river otters. The scene should have been enchanting, but the ever-present risk of falling into the powerful current quickened their pulses. Nara's breath caught in her throat as she watched Araguaia slip momentarily into dolphin form to navigate deeper pools. She recognized the danger in her growing attachment to him, but her heart wouldn't relent. Near the falls, they discovered a cavern hidden behind a veil of crashing water. Inside, the air hung heavy with dampness, and the roar outside was muted to a muffled thrum. A faint glow outlined clusters of delicate lilies with red-tipped petals. Their elusive fragrance mingled with the mineral smell of wet stone. As Nara approached, she felt tiny hairs on her arms lift. Some subtle magic wove itself into this place. She bent carefully, retrieving several blooms and wrapping them in cloth. When she stood, Araguaia's expression was etched with relief and longing. A subtle tension flickered in his eyes, a silent conversation that Nara couldn't quite decipher. Still, the presence of the cure so close at hand emboldened her. She reached for his hand. They were only inches apart when a surge in the waterfall poured over the cavern's entrance, momentarily sealing them in darkness. In that instant she felt his touch, warmer than she ever expected from a creature of the river. They made camp in a dry outcropping of rock near the cavern mouth, lighting a small flame. The lilies rested safe within Nara's basket, the final piece in the life-saving brew they would prepare upon returning. Yet it was difficult to focus on anything but Araguaia's presence. He sat across the flame, its light dancing on his features. "Your village will recover," he murmured, gently touching the clay container of Piarana's mantle. "You have done something few humans would dare attempt." Nara's voice was thick with emotion. Not alone. She reached for him across the fire. A hush fell, a quivering moment in which she saw the depth of his own vulnerability. He was neither fully human nor merely a beast of the waters. In him existed an ancient soul, longing for acceptance. Then he leaned forward, and their lips met with tender urgency. In that hidden cavern, time stilled, as though the thunderous waterfall beyond them quieted in reverence to the bond they shared. Dawn arrived with a spray of golden light across the waterfall. Despite the morning air's crispness, gravity weighed on their hearts, for they both understood the precarious nature of what they had done. Tradition held that a Boto must never form a lasting union with a mortal, lest a curse befall both worlds. Nara had grown up hearing that Botos who linger in human communities draw the ire of river spirits, resulting in floods or storms. Araguaia spoke of possible consequences with sorrow edging his voice. Nevertheless, offering Nara the cure and his companionship had become more precious to him than the security of his old life. "Perhaps we can prove them wrong," he whispered, catching Nara's hand in his. She gave a small nod, lips parted in uncertainty. Resolute as she was, the outcome of daring to unite mortal and dolphin weighed heavily on her mind. Their journey back toward the village began under the watchful gloom of the rainforest canopy. Vultures circled overhead, gliding on thermals. Stray howler monkeys shrieked warnings of intruders. Ever drawn to the waters, Araguaia frequently slipped beneath the surface in his dolphin form, while Nara guided the canoe. She thought frequently of home, of her father's feverish eyes. She imagined his face lighting up when she handed him a steaming cup of the infernal tasting brew. She pictured the children running again along the muddy banks. But always in her visions she saw Araguaia standing at her side, a slight smile warming his features. The hush between them was at times joyous, at times burdened by the unspoken fear that came with returning. If the village discovered his true identity, would they recoil in superstition, or would gratitude soften hardened hearts? As they neared the village one late afternoon, the river took on a familiar bend. Smoke rose listlessly from the huts. No children laughed from the shore. Anxiety constricted Nara's throat. She had returned, but had it been in time? Araguia lingered by the canoe's stern, scanning the deserted bank through a half-lidded gaze. When she stepped ashore, dread rattled through her. The hush of empty pathways replaced the typical chatter of daily life. She rushed into her father's open-sided hut. The sight of him, eyes sunken and face pale, shattered the last lines of her composure. Fighting tears, she fumbled for the basket that held the lilies. Under Araguia's guidance, she combined the blossoms with the Piarana's mantle and the other herbs she'd collected. The brew boiled in an earthen pot, filling the air with a pungent fragrance. One by one, the villagers emerged from their homes, hopeful but wary. She administered the medicine first to her father, tilting the gourd gently to his cracked lips. A hush enveloped the space. Minutes stretched like hours as sweat beaded on his brow. Then he exhaled a slow breath and sank into a more peaceful sleep than he had known in weeks. Encouraged, she tended to the children, the frail elders, and the mothers who clutched their babies with trembling hands. Araguia observed from the periphery, uncertain of his welcome. Still, the villagers saw him standing near Nara as she worked diligently, stirring pot after pot of the cure. Though suspicion flickered in their eyes, the urgency of saving their loved ones overshadowed heated questions about who or what this stranger might be. Even the local healers, once baffled by the disease, now watched with relief and curiosity, occasionally exchanging quiet, measured glances with Araguana. Morning brought the first signs of recovery. Children who had barely moved found themselves able to sip broth. Older villagers awakened with renewed strength. Nara's heart soared as she felt her father's hand squeeze hers. It was a delicate, exhausted gesture, but it carried the force of 100 embraces. She hurried outside, tears of gratitude glimmering in her eyes. The village was tentatively alive once more. People stepped from their hammocks, greeting neighbors with cautious hope. Araguia hovered in the shadows of the huts, unsure if he should retreat, but curiosity and thankfulness began to weigh more strongly in the villagers' minds than fear. A few approached him, offering quiet words of appreciation. "You came with our Nara when she needed you," said one mother. "We owe you a debt," murmured an elder, nodding in respect. Aragoa responded with a solemn bow, an unspoken acknowledgement that their acceptance was a gift to him as well. Yet not all spirits rest easily. In the early afternoon, the wind picked up, sending ripples across the river. Clouds built along the horizon, their underside tinted an ominous green. Whispers drifted about an approaching storm, unnaturally fierce for this season. Araguia's expression turned grave. "The river spirits have learned of our bond," he told Nara quietly, as she prepared another round of medicine. "They wish to test our resolve. Boto shapeshifters who linger ashore risk incurring nature's wrath." No sooner had he spoken than the forest canopy churned with howling gales, thunder rolling overhead. The thatched roofs of the village rattled. Nara noticed the uneasy stares of neighbors locked upon Araguia, like they suspected him of causing this chaos. Her jaw tightened. She would not let fear overshadow what had been gained. Emerging into the open, she felt the rain's first onslaught like pebbles against her skin. Lightning arced across the sky, illuminating Araguia's pained expression. He gazed upon the turbulent river, flashes of pink dancing along his arms as he struggled to maintain his human form in the midst of the spirit's anger. A twisting funnel of wind began to swirl over the water, sending villagers scattering inland. Nara grabbed his hand, forcing him to look into her eyes. "We face this storm together," she said, voice resolute. Panic danced across his features. "If I return to the river, I can redirect some of the current. But if the spirits deem me unworthy for staying ashore, they may banish me from these waters entirely." The conflict in his voice cut Nara to the core. She knew his love for his aquatic realm was as deep-seated as her love for her village. But time was not on their side. Already, drenching rain threatened the huts, built on fragile stilts. The swirling wind that hovered above the water gained momentum like some cyclonic monster. Despite the violent gusts, Araguaia raced for the river's edge. In one swift motion, he cast aside the garment he wore, revealing the pale pink sheen of his transformation rippling across his limbs. Then, with a graceful dive, he disappeared into the rising waves. Nara stood on the bank, drenched to the bone, eyes stinging from the sheets of rain. The current raged, nearly washing away canoes pulled onto the shore. She spotted the occasional flash of pink as Araguaia fought the fierce undertow. Gradually, the spinning funnel's path shifted, moving away from the village. Yet the swirling waters pitched dangerously, threatening to surge onto land. Several villagers, though grateful at first, began to back away in dread at the spectacle of the shape-shifting dolphin man intercepting the storm's fury. Nara refused to step back. She raised her arms as though in defiance of the raging sky, pleading in silent prayer for Araguaia's safety and her villagers' survival. With a final clash of thunder, the swirling funnel collapsed, dispersing in a crescendo of wave and wind. Rain still poured, but the worst of the storm had broken. Araguaia surfaced, blowing a mighty exhale through his blowhole, then sank again in exhaustion. Nara splashed into the river, calling his name. When he re-emerged, powerless to maintain his dolphin form, she grasped his arm and guided him onto the bank. His breathing was ragged, human features faltering as pink tinted his skin. But the storm's wrath had abated, leaving the village battered but standing. As the clouds drifted away and the last drops fell, the hush that followed was unlike anything Nara had experienced. The villagers approached with wonder in their eyes. Some knelt on the muddy ground in thanksgiving, while others stared, mesmerized, at the man who had subdued a raging tempest. In the days that followed, the sick continued to recover, gaining strength with every dose of the brew. Homes were repaired, battered canoes salvaged. Nara's father could once again walk unassisted, offering a faint smile for the first time in weeks. Stories spread of Araguaia's bravery, how he faced the fury of the river spirits for love of a mortal. Many who once doubted the shapeshifter's intentions approached him with respect, if still tinged with caution. Araguaia remained near Nara's side, assisting in mending nets, gathering driftwood, and sometimes guiding fishermen through safer channels. No vow or formal decree was made, but an unspoken acceptance settled across the village. Still, the path ahead was fragile. As evening shadows grew long, Araguaia confided his lingering unease to Nara. "Someday I may be compelled to return to the deeper rivers," he admitted, voice low. "Our worlds are not meant to mingle forever. But I cannot stand apart now, not when my heart is yours." Nara, resting her head on his shoulder, felt the weight of a decision neither fully understood. She thought back to the shimmering lagoon where she had first seen him, a figure half in moonlight, half in water. She recalled the fear that once clenched her chest. Now, she had only gratitude for what that night had set in motion. "He will learn a new way," she breathed. "If our love must defy the currents, let it do so beyond doubt." So they lived, day by day, bridging two worlds. Nara remained the village's steadfast healer, tending ailments with the newly discovered remedy, teaching others how to gather the correct herbs, ensuring that no outsider traveled upstream alone. Araguaia often vanished at dawn, returning at dusk with knowledge gleaned from the watery highways of the Amazon. Sometimes he arrived in human form. Other times, a pink dorsal fin skimmed the water till he rose to greet her at the bank. The children, their once feverish bodies now lively, giggled at glimpses of his transformation. He taught them songs of the river's secret language, while Nara soothed them with lullabies passed down by her grandmother. And though murmurings of caution and reverence persisted, tales that love between a Dolphin man and a mortal could upend nature's balanced life, in the village pressed on, guided by compassion that overcame fear. No culminating feast or ceremony declared their union official, yet their bond endured. Each day, the river's tide brought new challenges, new joys, and a reminder that some distances are bridged by hearts willing to meet halfway. Late at night, beneath a canopy filled with constellations, Nara would gaze at the placid waters, reflecting on the swirl of events that had transformed her from a desperate villager into a healer unafraid of wonder. The memory of Aragua's transformation, how gently he had asked, why she dared approach him, remained as vivid as a painted mural in her mind. Where once she only saw the surface of things, she now perceived the hidden connections binding every creature of the rainforest, mortal or otherwise. In time, the village fully regained its vitality, children once again running along the shoreline, mothers exchanging recipes under sunlit skies. Houses that had been silent with illness now echoed with laughter. Araguaia found a place among them, straddling the line between caretaker and visitor. Some nights, he vanished into the river's darkness to commune with the secrets it held. Others, he remained with Nara beneath the thatched roof, feeling the warmth of a small hearth fire. In quiet intervals, the two of them acknowledged the fragility of their arrangement. But as the rainy season gave way to sunlit months, they learned that love, like the Amazon's currents, could carve out its own path through seemingly unyielding terrain. Leads of legend sprouted among the villagers, stories of sickness thwarted, of a storm subdued by a man who was also a dolphin, of a love that transcended fate's boundaries. Outsiders, arriving by boat or foot, heard rumors of a place where man and spirit met without fear. Some disbelieved, others were drawn to learn more. For those who came in earnest curiosity, Nara and Araguaia guided them cautiously, ever protective of the village's harmony. Always, the memory of crisis reminded them of how delicate and precious their peace truly was. And as the seasons cycled, carrying the river's flow onward, the shape-shifting Boto and the mortal woman wrote their own chapter in the tapestry of Amazonian folklore. A testament that in the quiet spaces between river and land, between human and spirit, a love powerful enough to defy all currents could flourish.